It's true of most sports. It's certainly true in Formula One. History shows that. You clinch a Constructors' Championship, you clinch a Drivers' Championship, and there are still races to run. It's very, very difficult to sustain the same level of intensity if that intensity isn't real. Red Bull did a pretty good job going into Austin, I think. No development, of course, on the car. Why would there be? They're only thinking of 2024 at this point. But lots of work on the livery. Big launch about the new livery. Stars and stripes on the side of the car. Look great. And the usual approach to Friday practice. It was a sprint format. Difficult because there's only 1 hour in which to get everything right. But Red Bull very, very focused on going through their normal processes. Out of the pits, work on the adjustment of the car as best they can, put fuel in the car, don't forget the fuel runs, do that for 20 minutes, and then right at the end, out on the soft tyre. So Max Verstappen, quickest in all three formats, quickest out of the box, quickest with fuel in the car, and also quickest at the end on soft tyres. This is in the 1 hour session on Friday. Then into Parc Fermé, and then into qualifying on Friday afternoon for the Grand Prix on Sunday. All looking as if Max Verstappen was going to take the pole, but things weren't quite the same. It all came down to Max having to do a pole lap on his last run in Q3. We've seen how many times we've seen that this year, and he's always delivered. On this occasion, locked up slightly going into turn one, the uphill left-hander. No real problem. Kept it on the island beautifully through the middle sector, through the S's. Looked really good. And change of direction down into the hairpin. Quick on the straight, very quick on the straight. 3.24 compared with Charles Leclerc's 3.25 in the Ferrari. We'll get onto that in a second. Ferrari very quick in a straight line. But then on the second last corner, Max ran slightly wide. All four wheels went over the rumble strip, the other side of the white line. And although he got the pole by a mere hundredth of a second over Charles Leclerc, it was a very short-lived pole. Within seconds, his time was deleted. Sergio Perez, still complaining of understeer, only P9 in the other RB19. And so, yes, as we discussed in the live stream on Monday, in answer to one of the viewers' questions about Red Bull having now won the championship, obviously there'll be no more upgrades on that car between now and the end of the year. Will this be an opportunity for Ferrari, for McLaren, for Mercedes to perhaps get a win, certainly to get some strong results? The answer, of course, was always going to be yes. And there was a further answer, which was that Ferrari were always going to be looking good around Austin. Because, again, it flatters the good qualities of the 2023 Ferrari. It's very quick in a straight line, slightly quicker than the Red Bull we've seen so far through the speed trap in Austin, as predicted, as we saw at Monza, as we saw at Singapore. And very, very good at high-speed braking as well. Very stable at the end of the straight. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz looking really good in that area. They're in very, very strong shape for a good result on Sunday, for a potential win on Sunday, that is. McLaren do not have the benefit of being on the hardest of the Pirelli compounds. They've always gone well on that compound, so it was always going to be interesting to see how they went in Austin. We saw at Monza that although they were really good in terms of downforce, they weren't brilliantly quick in a straight line. Well, here in Austin, they're not far away in a straight line, and they haven't really lost anything in terms of their aerodynamic grip on the corners where it really matters. So really impressive performance improvement, I think, by McLaren since Monza to Austin now. Comparing the top speeds, Lando Norris 321, that compares with the 324 of Max Verstappen, the 325 of Charles Leclerc. That, given the DRS we have in Formula One, puts the McLaren in a very raceable position on Sunday. Lewis Hamilton was the quicker of the two Mercedes drivers. He loves driving around Austin. He loves the change of direction. He loves the undulations. Looked really good in the car as well. Only 317 in a straight line. George Russell had a time deleted as well. And so that potentially is going to be a problem for them on race day, as we saw at Monza. So whereas McLaren have made that progress in top speed without losing downforce, Mercedes, yes, they've got the downforce here. It's a pretty good car, an agile car. Lewis looked brilliant in it. Only 317 in a straight line could be a problem for them come race day. Another surprise, Pierre Gasly looking very good. Both Alpine drivers looking very good. 320 in top speed as well. So they've definitely picked up some top speed in that Alpine, but again, without losing any downforce, a little bit like McLaren. It was an interesting day amongst teammates as well, because Max got quite annoyed with Sergio Perez. Actually, he blamed the team for allowing Sergio Perez to be where he was as he was coming into the last corner on his first run in Q3, and that put him off slightly. And that was one of the reasons he had to try so hard on his second run. And the other comparison was always going to be Lando Norris. He was always going to fly around Austin, and Oscar Piastri, new to the circuit, but we know already how good this guy is. There was an interesting moment in that untimed session before qualifying when Lando's race engineer said, Lando, work on some different lines through turns 13 to 16, which are the tight acceleration braking runs at the end of the long straight before the very nice long triple apex right-hander. Rather strange place for them to say that. And it's interesting. I don't know whether that's shorthand for things they've talked about, which is Oscar's definitely using shorter corners, and you need to start thinking about that because that's where he's getting an advantage over you. But it's not a question of line as such. That's the point I'm making. It's not a question of line. It's a question of manipulating the dynamic weights in order to do what you need to do to have a shorter corner in that order. And if they're just saying to Lando, turn in earlier, but he's still basically driving the same way, in my opinion, that's not going to make any difference at all. And Lando will probably get quite lost if that's what they're going to start doing to him. If they're starting to realize that he has got longer corners, if they think the solution is just to turn in earlier without working on all the other stuff, that is going to be confusing and it's going to be a problem. So, and as I say, Oscar very, very good out of the box again in Austin, but kind of faded away at the back end of qualifying. And, that was an interesting little part of Friday practice. And I thought the other telling one was Sergio Perez, when he got on the radio to say that the front wasn't very good. I think he used the word it was very light at the front or something like that. And he talked about high-speed understeer as well, which he won't like, obviously. But then he immediately said, as a predicate to the sentence, but don't start playing with the brake balance because it's going to affect traction. And that, I thought, was a really good comment from Sergio Perez. He knows, he loves the feel of what he can do with traction. And this circuit does reward, as I said in the live stream on Monday, it does reward some of the qualities of Sergio in that respect. Traction, the last corner, for example, is a classic Sergio Perez corner. To some extent, the second last corner as well. Change of direction, Max is always going to have him, and some of the other bits there as well. The long right-hander, Max will have him as well. But in terms of traction, it's not a bad circuit. And I thought it was interesting that Perez was saying, but I don't want anything to affect the traction of the car because it's obviously pretty good at the moment. So that was the other interesting thing. The other comparison, of course, was Charles Leclerc against Carlos Sainz. Charles Leclerc, really good, really aggressive, really competitive, looked like the real Charles Leclerc of old on a circuit that was always going to be good for him, as it is always going to be good for Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Not because there are lots of corners there where they can do a lot different from their teammate, but because it is an exhilarating circuit to drive with its undulations and its quick change of direction, its other corners. Those drivers are always going to be at their peak. And so we saw it with Charles. But I thought the impressive thing about Ferrari was how near Carlos Sainz was to Charles Leclerc. Given that the Ferrari is good around here, given that Charles Leclerc's driving really well, I was impressed that Carlos Sainz was as near as he was. And he didn't have a particularly good qualifying. He had a bobble in Q2 when he got balked by Yuki Tsunoda and that lap was lost. So he did the second Q2 lap under pressure. Q3 was okay. It seemed to be okay for him. But he didn't have quite the momentum that Charles had going into it. So all told, I think he did a very good job in the other Ferrari as well. And he starts P4 splitting the two Mercedes. So good result all round for Ferrari. As I say, no real surprise. That was what we talked about in the live stream, how well Ferrari would go in Austin. And we've seen in the past how well they go. So let's see if Ferrari can win this US Grand Prix in Austin, what Max Verstappen can do from P6 as the new world champion. Or it's not that he massively felt any pressure anyway in the last 3 or 4 months, but he is the world champion. He can completely relax and just enjoy the day. Will he then take a little bit more risk, maybe in traffic, that he wouldn't in any other situation? That's something, of course, we'll see on Sunday. And then there's the battle between, well, certainly between Ferrari and McLaren. And then there's Mercedes there as well, looking really strong, but not quite as quick on the straight. And that may tell in the Grand Prix on Sunday. Anyway, that's for then. For tomorrow, Saturday, is sprint day. It'll be the shootout followed by the sprint race. I'm personally not a fan, but nonetheless, I'll be there watching it. I'll be doing the video afterwards. See you then.